Roman Reigns and Jimmy Uso visit Uso in hospital after brutal attack before Elimination Chamber. Uso is lying in a hospital bed right now fighting for his career and possibly his life after the most vicious and cowardly attack in recent WWE history, and the emotional footage of Roman Reigns and Jimmy Uso visiting their fallen family member in that hospital room is absolutely heartbreaking and rage-inducing in equal measure because you can see the genuine pain and fury in their eyes as they stand beside G's broken body, knowing that someone targeted him specifically to prevent him from competing in the Elimination Chamber match that could have changed everything for the bloodline. This was not a wrestling angle that happened in the ring with referees and medical staff immediately available. This was a calculated assault in a parking garage mere hours before one of the biggest matches of the year, leaving G unconscious and severely injured to the point that he had to be rushed to the hospital instead of competing in a match he had trained months to prepare for. And now Roman and Jimmy are left dealing with the devastating reality that their family was attacked, that G might never wrestle again depending on the severity of his injuries, and that somewhere out there is a person or group responsible for this who needs to be found and destroyed. If you are not absolutely furious about what happened to GUSO, if you do not want to see Roman and Jimmy get brutal revenge on whoever did this, or if you think WWE is taking this storyline too far into uncomfortable territory, you need to stay with me because what happened and what comes next is going to define WWE for months. The attack on GUSO happened in the arena parking structure approximately 3 hours before the Elimination Chamber event was scheduled to begin. G had arrived alone, which in retrospect was a critical mistake, but he had been driving separately from Roman and Jimmy due to personal reasons that had been building tension within the bloodline for weeks. Security footage that has since been reviewed shows G walking toward the arena entrance carrying his gear bag, completely unaware that multiple attackers were hiding behind vehicles waiting for him. The assault was swift and brutal, with at least 4 masked individuals emerging simultaneously and overwhelming G before he could defend himself or call for help. The attackers used weapons including steel chairs and what appeared to be a lead pipe, targeting G's head, ribs, and legs with sickening precision that suggested this was planned to cause maximum damage and ensure he could not compete. Witnesses who arrived on the scene after hearing the commotion described finding G unconscious in a pool of blood, his body positioned at an unnatural angle that immediately made clear this was serious. Arena medical staff were called immediately, but the severity of G's condition required calling an actual ambulance and transporting him to a nearby hospital rather than treating him in the arena medical facility. The Elimination Chamber match was thrown into chaos as WWE officials scrambled to find a replacement for G while simultaneously trying to figure out who was responsible for the attack. Roman Reigns and Jimmy Uso were informed of the attack while they were in their locker room preparing for their own appearances at the event. Multiple sources describe Roman's reaction as genuinely terrifying, with the tribal chief reportedly destroying furniture and screaming threats while demanding to know who attacked his cousin and why security had failed to protect a member of the bloodline. Jimmy was equally devastated, but his reaction was more internalized, a quiet fury mixed with guilt that he had not been there to protect his brother. Both men immediately demanded to be taken to the hospital to see G, and while WWE officials initially tried to convince them to stay for the show, one look at Roman's face made it clear that was not a negotiation anyone was going to win. The footage of Roman and Jimmy arriving at the hospital, which was captured by local news crews who had been monitoring police scanners and heard about a WWE wrestler being admitted with serious injuries, shows 2 men who look nothing like their usual confident wrestling personas. Roman's face is a mask of barely controlled rage, his jaw clenched so tight you can see the muscles working. Jimmy looks destroyed, his usual energetic personality completely absent as he walks beside Roman toward the hospital entrance. They are flanked by security and WWE officials, but both men look like they would fight through anyone and anything to get to G's side. Inside G's hospital room, the scene is absolutely gut-wrenching according to people who were present. G is heavily bandaged, with visible injuries to his face that include swelling around both eyes, a split lip, and bruising that extends down his neck. His ribs are wrapped indicating broken or fractured bones, and one leg is in a brace suggesting significant damage to the knee or ankle. He is conscious but heavily medicated for pain, drifting in and out of lucidity as Roman and Jimmy stand on either side of his bed looking at their family member who was supposed to be competing in one of the biggest matches of his career but instead is fighting through injuries that might end everything he has worked for. Roman's first words to G, spoken quietly but with absolute conviction, were reportedly, "Tell me who did this. Give me a name, a face, anything, and I swear on everything they will pay for this." G, struggling to speak through the pain and medication, could only shake his head, unable to identify his attackers because of the masks and the speed of the assault. The frustration on Roman's face was visible, the tribal chief confronting the reality that he could not immediately exact revenge because there was no clear target, no obvious enemy to destroy in retaliation for this attack on his family. Jimmy's approach was different but equally emotional. He grabbed G's hand and apologized repeatedly, blaming himself for not being there, for letting the tensions within the bloodline create a situation where G was vulnerable and alone. The brothers' relationship has always been the emotional core of the USO story, and seeing Jimmy broken by guilt while G tries to reassure him through obvious pain creates genuinely affecting television even in the terrible context of this situation. G managed to tell Jimmy that this was not his fault, that whoever did this would have found a way regardless, and that Jimmy needed to focus on finding who was responsible rather than drowning in guilt. The doctor's report on G's condition, which was shared with Roman and Jimmy in that hospital room, included injuries that make wrestling in the immediate future impossible and raise questions about long-term career viability. G sustained a severe concussion that will require weeks if not months of recovery and monitoring. He has 3 broken ribs that will need time to heal and could be vulnerable to re-injury. His left knee suffered significant ligament damage that might require surgery and extensive rehabilitation. The cumulative damage means G is looking at minimum 3 months out of action, possibly 6 months or longer depending on how his body responds to treatment. For a professional wrestler in his 30s, injuries of this severity are career-threatening, and the possibility that G might never return to his previous level of performance is very real. Roman's response to hearing this medical assessment was to immediately demand that WWE provide the absolute best medical care available regardless of cost, that G would have access to the top surgeons and physical therapists in the country, and that the company would cover everything needed to give G the best possible chance at full recovery. This was Roman in full tribal chief mode, using his power and influence to protect his family, making it clear that he expected WWE to treat G's recovery as the highest priority. WWE officials who were present agreed to everything Roman demanded, partly because it was the right thing to do but also because nobody wanted to be the person who told Roman Reigns no while he was in this emotional state. Jimmy, meanwhile, was focused on the immediate question of revenge. He told Roman that they needed to find out who did this before the trail went cold, that every hour that passed made it less likely they would identify the attackers, and that if WWE security and police could not or would not find answers fast enough, then they would conduct their own investigation using whatever methods necessary. Roman agreed completely, and the two of them began planning how to systematically go through every person in WWE who might have motive to attack G, how to leverage their power and connections to get information, and how to make it clear to everyone in the locker room that cooperation in finding the attackers was not optional. The Elimination Chamber match itself became almost secondary to the story of G's attack. WWE brought in a replacement competitor, but the announcers spent significant time discussing what happened to G, showing footage of the ambulance leaving the arena, and speculating about who could be responsible. The crowd was invested in the story, chanting G's name during the match and showing genuine concern for his well-being. Social media exploded with fans expressing outrage at the attack, theories about who might be responsible, and demands that WWE find and punish whoever did this. The engagement was massive, with GUSO trending worldwide and the attack being discussed across all wrestling media. Back at the hospital, as visiting hours ended and medical staff insisted that G needed rest, Roman and Jimmy were forced to leave with the promise they would return the next day. The footage of them leaving shows two men who look like they are barely containing volcanic rage, their body language radiating threat to anyone who might cross their path. Roman put his arm around Jimmy's shoulders as they walked, a rare display of physical affection between them that showed how this tragedy had brought them closer together. They were united in purpose now, all previous tensions within the bloodline temporarily set aside in favor of the singular goal of finding and destroying whoever attacked their family. The investigation into who attacked GUSO becomes the central mystery driving WWE storylines forward. Suspicion falls on multiple potential culprits, each with their own possible motives. Solo Sikoa, who has had issues with the bloodline recently, immediately becomes a suspect despite his denials. Various rivals of Roman who might target G as a way to hurt the tribal chief are investigated. Tag teams who lost to the Usos and might harbor resentment are questioned. Even people within WWE management who might benefit from the bloodline being destabilized come under scrutiny. The paranoia and suspicion create fantastic television as Roman and Jimmy interrogate various wrestlers, sometimes through conversation and sometimes through more physical persuasion. The emotional toll on Roman and Jimmy is explored in depth over subsequent weeks. Roman becomes even more paranoid and controlling, determined to prevent any further attacks on his family by tightening security and limiting trust to only the absolute inner circle. Jimmy is consumed by guilt and anger, becoming more reckless in the ring as he channels his emotions into violence against anyone he fights. The change in their characters feels organic and justified given the circumstances, adding layers to personas that could sometimes feel one-dimensional. The possibility that G might never return to wrestling is addressed honestly rather than being brushed aside. Roman and Jimmy both have to confront what it would mean for the bloodline if G's career is over, how they would move forward without him, whether revenge against his attackers would even matter if G could not be made whole again. These are heavy themes for wrestling to explore, but they add genuine emotional stakes to a storyline that could otherwise feel like just another angle. Thank you for watching Wrestling News CC. Tell us in the comments who you think attacked GUSO and what kind of revenge Roman Reigns and Jimmy Uso should take when they finally find out who was responsible for putting their family in the hospital.